I've been on the hunt for a vintage cedar chest for the past couple of years that I could turn into my own. Each time I manage to find one that is in my budget, it manages to slip away and find another home. Until I finally was able to pick up this one. I couldn't pass this one up at $40. It does need some work. The veneer is peeling off in several places, so I'll be painting this piece. I've never painted a piece before, since I do prefer the natural look of stained wood. But given the condition and that I plan to use it in our primary bedroom where we already have a lot of wood furniture, I thought a freshly painted piece would be a nice addition to our upcoming bedroom tour. I thought this chest was a great option for storing our out-of-season clothes while also bringing in some character. Can you get more storage for less money and less effort than this makeover? Yes. Here is my cost breakdown. It's a rough estimate since I had some things on hand. Depending on the cost of the secondhand furniture piece and the total cost of the materials you need for your project, it may or may not be cheaper than buying something new. For me, it's not always about getting something cheaper. Sometimes it comes down to value. Sometimes there are pieces like this chest where the quality is just something that if I wanted to find that retail would cost so much more. From my experience, there have been so many vintage pieces that have quality and craftsmanship that far exceed something in the same price range that I could get new at a retail store. IKEA has some pieces like the Rast 3-drawer chest. It's made out of solid pine. It costs $59.99. On Amazon, you can get this chest for $183. The title says that it's a cedar chest, but when you look at the description, it says that it's cedar lined and that it uses MDF. I found this other option on Amazon for a 100% cedar chest. That one did cost more at $369. This one doesn't have any finish options from what I see. So for me, if I was considering that piece, I would also factor in that I might want to paint it or stain it so that it suits my style and how I want it to look in my space. Before we start working on the chest, I wanted to go over some safety notes. Whether I'm buying furniture new or secondhand, I think it's important to be aware of any recalls and safety hazards. According to the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, cedar chests from the brands Lane and Virginia Made, manufactured between 1912 and 1987, were recalled because the chest automatically locks when the lid is closed. After I was done with my makeover, I used a square drill bit and a screwdriver to take out the lock completely. I'm still looking into whether I can order a replacement lock from United Furniture Industries. I also used an at-home instant lead test to make sure that this piece didn't have any lead in it. I used the ProLab lead surface test kit. I've talked about crystal in past videos. This test could be used for that as well. Now let's get into it. The very first thing I did was clean the exterior with some simple green. I followed the instructions on the back and put it in a little plastic spray bottle to make it easier to use. Had a little brush that I used to work it into little crevices. I then used a rag and water to remove the simple green, make sure that there was nothing left on the surface. I'm going to remove the veneer rather than trying to glue it together in this area because it has so much cracking that I think it'll just be cleaner if I remove it and fill it in with a putty rather than risk me not getting glue in all the right places and it eventually coming off. When I got home, I didn't realize that this doesn't have any tools to measure. So I am going to use the scale that I had on hand. I already set it to 0 with the lid on top of here so that I can measure 50 grams of this and 1 gram of this. And then I'll mix those two together and I'll keep making batches like that. So just so you know, if you do buy this, it doesn't come with any measuring tools. You can see here at first it was going on smoothly. The back label said there was a working time of 15 minutes and it was probably about 7 or 8 minutes and it was already turning so hard that I couldn't work with it and needed to make another batch. I don't know if I got the ratios wrong or if it was too hot. I don't know. This stuff is really strong. I've used a different wood filler in the past. This is my first time using this and I did not like it. Next time I'll probably try something different. I just wasted so much product because it was drying so fast. So we'll see how that goes. I'm not feeling too good about it and I don't want to do it again. It's been about 30 minutes since I put this here, so I'm gonna sand this a little bit and see if I can put on another coat on top and then go from there. I'm just gonna use 120 grit paper. I did one last coat before moving on to the final sanding and cleanup. I started with 80 grit sandpaper because of how grainy and clumpy it was. Then I finished it off with 220 grit. I scuff sanded the exterior with 120 grit. I used the Shop Vac to clean up a lot of the dust, and then used my Tack Cloth to remove even more. I put some foil on my tray to make cleanup easier. I used the BIN Shellac primer. I remembered to tape off my edges so that I could get that clean edge. I was so excited to be done with sanding and to be able to move on to this step. I was serious about my prep work, so I thought that doing 2 coats would be a good idea. But after my second coat started drying, I started to notice some cracking. From what I read, the best thing to have done would have been to strip it. The other solution I saw was to do some light sanding over the cracking with 320 or 400 grit paper, then use denatured alcohol over the damaged area. I didn't do that. I just sanded it. I don't know if this will mean there will be cracking in the long term. From what I read, it sounds like this happened because I applied the primer too thick, or I didn't wait enough time in between coats. I used Fusion Mineral Paint. I used the color Raw Silk. This isn't cheap, but it is worth the hype. On their website, you can get this for $29.99. I used about half for the project, maybe a little less. I can't get over the richness of the pigment of this paint and the nice matte finish. I want to highlight some things that they note on their website. It has a 21-day cure time. No sealer is required. It has a built-in top coat already. It's UV, water, and stain resistant. I highly recommend checking out the Fusion Mineral Paint website. They have a lot of helpful information there. On their website, they say that lots of paint causes brush strokes. Paint should not be dripping off the brush. So here I was really trying to do that and apply some very thin coats. So my first coat looked really patchy. Look at how pretty this paint is drying. So it's been about an hour that I let it dry, and now I'm going to do a second coat, and I'm going to hope that that's the last coat I have to do. So you can see the unevenness here. For now, that's all I'm going to do. I really did not like that wood filler. It smelled so bad and I couldn't keep working with it. I preferred working with a brush instead of the roller because I had more control over the amount of paint. I was able to find my bigger paintbrush, so I switched over to that instead of the roller. It's time for cleanup and finishing touches. I removed the tape. I sanded the inside of the chest to refresh the aromas. Then I used my Shop Vac to clean up all the dust. Then I used the same Tack Cloth that I was using earlier to remove more of the dust. Then I used a mixture of bleach and water to make sure everything was nice and clean. I recommend doing a test patch first. Let's look back to see how this chest looked when I first got it. It had missing veneer and scuffs all over the place. Now let's see how it looks after some TLC and a fresh new coat of paint. Look at the curves on this chest and look at the joinery on the corners, and the weight and just the way it feels is something that I really appreciate. The character of this chest and the story it tells with its history and its imperfections is something that I value and I appreciate bringing into my home. I recognize that there are a lot of considerations when buying furniture, from time, convenience, to what's available near you. My goal isn't to discourage anyone from buying something new retail. It's just to inspire the possibility of taking something that might otherwise be overlooked and giving it a second life. I've painted cabinets and I've painted rooms and walls, but this was the first furniture piece that I was trying to really fix, and this is the first one that I've ever painted. This is the first time I was trying to fix some issues like peeling veneer. I know it's not perfect. There are visible areas where I could have done a better job. This is a learning process. I learned a lot in this project, and that's also something that I personally value, is just learning and developing my skills. I ran into so many more challenges than I was expecting. I thought that fixing the veneer would be a lot more simple than it was. I had so much trouble working with that wood filler. Then I made things worse by making my primer too thick. So I learned a lot about shellac primer. I learned what wood filler I'm not going to use in the future, and I learned that I really am a big fan of mineral fusion paints. As someone who's new to painting furniture, this paint made things really easy. I did buy their Tough Coat, which I plan to use for a different project, and I might add it on here after I decide whether or not I want to do a wet sand to get an even smoother finish. It was so easy to work with. The cleanup was so easy. In the areas where I had some of the cracking in the shellac primer, this paint ended up filling those really tiny cracks. For the next project, I would consider not even using the shellac primer if I know there's likely not going to be any bleed through, or I probably could have at least just gotten away with one coat, and that would have had a much better result than me putting 2 thick coats and then it cracking. I'm so excited for you all to see this in our primary bedroom starting next week, so stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. Whether secondhand shopping is something new to you and you're asking questions in the comments, or whether you're a seasoned thrifter sharing your best finds, I enjoy your comments so much. I appreciate your encouraging comments for this channel. I'll see you next week.